Chapter 1. The Silence Before the Spark. There is a moment before every act of creation, a silence. A stillness not of emptiness, but of sacred potential. A quiet, ancient pause before the birth of the sun. Before the symphony, there is no sound. Before the idea, there is only breath. And in that breath, the universe waits for your voice. You were not born to be a spectator. You were not put here to endlessly scroll, to read without remembrance, to consume wisdom and call it transformation. There is a war between becoming and observing, and too many have become archivists of greatness rather than architects of it. You're not here to collect knowledge like souvenirs in a forgotten attic. You're here to build, to forge, to create. But before you create, you must awaken. And that awakening begins now. You are standing in the exact position that every titan once stood. Edison stood here, in the dark, stumbling through failure 10,000 times before he summoned light. Carnegie stood here, poor, uneducated, mocked, before he raised an empire of steel. Lincoln stood here, defeated, broken, buried in loss, before he carried the soul of a nation through its darkest storm. They were not different from you. Flesh, bone, will, doubt, and decision. The only difference was not in their talent, not in their timing. It was in their refusal to bow to the silence. In their demand that the universe respond to the clarity of their intent. You are not waiting for a sign. The sign is waiting for you. We've created a culture of intellectual obesity, gorging ourselves on content, numbing ourselves with inspiration, collecting quotes as if wisdom alone could forge character. But the truth is raw, and it demands blood. You cannot read your way to the mountain's peak. You cannot highlight your way to the kingdom. You must bleed. You must become. You must move. Real manifestation is not magic. It is law. The law of cause and effect. The law of clarity. The law of consistency. The law of sweat on your palms and fire in your chest when you choose to rise while others sleep. You don't need more books. You need courage. You don't need another video. You need conviction. You don't need someone else's story. You need to begin writing your own. There is no greater tragedy than a soul packed with potential, sealed tight by fear and paralyzed by perfection. Stop waiting to feel ready. Stop looking for the perfect plan. The path is made by walking, not waiting. Every master was once a novice choking on self-doubt. Every legacy began with trembling hands. The voice of hesitation will never leave. It speaks in every generation, wearing new masks. But you were not born to obey it. You were born to answer it, with action, with movement, with breath made into steel. Understand this, manifestation is not wishful thinking. It is war. It is rebellion against every inner voice that tells you to play it safe. It is defiance in the face of your own excuses. It is the sacred act of choosing the harder road every single day. Not because it's easy, but because you must. You want purpose? Build it. You want meaning? Earn it. You want transformation? Step into the fire and burn away who you were never meant to be. Let go of the fantasy that there will be a moment when it all clicks, when fear vanishes, when certainty walks through the door. That moment is a myth. The world doesn't wait for you to be perfect. It only responds when you are real, relentless, awake. Every great artist, inventor, thinker, at some point, stood in the shadow of self-doubt. Michelangelo, carving gods from marble, once said his work was already inside the stone. He just had to chip away everything that was not it. That is your task now. Not to invent your greatness, but to reveal it. It already lives in you, clawing against the walls of your comfort. And yet you hesitate, because somewhere along the way, the world taught you to fear yourself, to worship strategy and sacrifice soul. To measure value in likes, in approval, in formulas that dilute originality. But greatness does not come from formulas. It is forged in defiance. In the gut-wrenching courage to do things your own way, to walk through storms, to keep building when the world is silent. Don't you see? The silence before creation is not emptiness. It is a challenge. The divine says, I dare you. I dare you to act as if what you do matters, because it does. I dare you to create when no one is watching. to grind when no one believes, to breathe life into something that once existed only in your soul. This is how revolutions are born. Not with applause, but with lonely decisions. The first time Walt Disney drew a mouse, it wasn't iconic. It was dismissed, ridiculed. He had no money, no protection. Just vision and stubborn belief. When everyone else folded, he doubled down. He didn't wait for proof. He became the proof. That's the difference. That's the line between those who read history and those who write it. The moment you understand this, deep in your bones, is the moment you step into authorship. Of your life. Of your destiny. Of everything that was once a whisper, now roared into existence. But you cannot write that story from the sidelines. You must enter the arena. With trembling hands. With a flawed heart. With all the broken, brilliant pieces of who you are. Because creation doesn't require perfection. It requires presence. So breathe. Stand still for just a moment, and listen. That silence you feel? That is the beginning of your revolution. It is not waiting for a strategy. It is not craving more content. It is begging for your hands. For your voice. For your decision to start. Right here. Right now. In this moment, everything can change. Not because someone gave you permission, but because you took it. Because you stood in the fire and said, I will not be a spectator in my own life. And so the silence begins to shift. The wind picks up. The dust stirs. The earth hears your cry, and something ancient responds. You are not alone in this. Every soul who ever dared to create walked this same path. They lit their torches in this same wind. You are in sacred company now. Do not let the next chapter of your life be written by hesitation. Let it be carved by courage. Let it drip with sweat, echo with clarity, blaze with belief. Because this is how you begin. This is how mountains are moved. Not by thought. Not by study. But by fire. And that fire? It lives in you. Let it burn. Chapter 2. The Mind Forged for War. There is no battlefield more brutal, no terrain more treacherous, than the human mind at war with itself. You can face the world with all its obstacles, with its critics and its chaos, but nothing will ever compare to the battle that happens behind your own eyes, between the part of you that dreams and the part of you that doubts, between the force that wants to rise and the fear that wants to hide. If you do not win this internal war, every victory you chase will be fleeting, hollow, unsustainable. This is where all creation begins, not with your hands, not with your resources, not with your circumstances, but with your mindset. We are taught to believe that circumstances are the great sculptors of destiny. That the wealthy succeed because of their wealth, that the famous rise because of their privilege, that the powerful inherit power like blood in their veins. But this lie is only comforting to those who are still asleep, still addicted to the illusion that greatness is inherited instead of earned. The truth is this: the mind, and only the mind, is the architect of reality. Circumstances are raw materials, yes, but they are useless in the hands of someone who does not believe. Every empire was first built in the invisible workshop of the mind. Every invention, every revolution, every paradigm-shifting leap forward in human progress began with someone who dared to think differently, not casually, not playfully, but violently. With conviction. With an obsession that burned like a fever. They weren't merely positive thinkers. They were mental warriors, trained to weaponize focus, trained to override fear with belief so strong that it made the impossible feel inevitable. You want to change your life? Then understand this one principle and burn it into your consciousness. The external always follows the internal. What you believe, deeply and without negotiation, will shape how you move, and how you move will shape what becomes real. The mind is not passive. It is not a mirror. It is a projector. Whatever you feed it, whatever you dwell on, whatever story you rehearse every day becomes the lens through which you interpret the world, and more dangerously, through which you build the world. If you believe the world is hostile, you will notice only threats. If you believe you are not good enough, every opportunity will feel like a trap. If you believe success belongs only to the lucky, you'll sabotage your own ascent so it aligns with your inner narrative. This is not mystical. This is not esoteric. This is neuroscience. This is biology. This is the law of focus and filtration. And so, if you want to manifest results in your life, you must first declare war on every thought, every internal whisper, every mental pattern that has taught you to aim low and settle. You cannot create a kingdom with the beliefs of a peasant. You cannot create abundance from a place of inner poverty. You must unlearn the lies that were baked into your identity by repetition, by culture, by trauma, by parents and teachers who meant well but lived small. And once you begin that unlearning, you must replace the debris with new patterns, forged not from fantasy, but from the absolute, unshakable belief that you were born to build, to lead, to create impact. Henry Ford was not a mechanical genius. He was a mental insurgent. He looked at the world of automobiles, a world that had declared cars as playthings for the rich, and said, "No. I will build a machine that the common man can own." People laughed. They always do. Because those who dream beyond the accepted limits of the present are always ridiculed by those who are imprisoned by it. But Ford didn't back down. He redesigned the process of thinking itself. He introduced the assembly line not just to factories, but to the mindset of progress. He didn't just build cars. He built possibility. And so must you. You must become fluent in the language of belief. You must surround yourself with thoughts that energize action, not suppress it. You must speak to yourself with such ferocity, such focus, that your inner critic can't get a word in. You don't eliminate doubt by reading affirmations. You eliminate doubt by starving it, by refusing to speak its language, by drowning it in evidence. And evidence is only built through action. Because belief, at its highest level, is not an emotion. It's not even a thought. It's a decision. A decision to move, even when the fear is screaming. A decision to build, even when there is no applause, no guarantee, no external proof that your vision is anything but madness. That's how belief works. It's faith with boots on. It walks. It grinds. It bleeds. Stop waiting for clarity. Clarity comes after you move. Stop waiting for confidence. Confidence comes after repetition. Stop waiting for some lightning bolt of motivation. Real creators don't wait for the lightning. They become the storm. Think of Lincoln. No one was less qualified to lead a nation into war. He was mocked for his voice, his appearance, his simplicity. He lost elections. He was underestimated. But he carried a vision that would not die. A mental map of what America could become if it survived itself. He wasn't led by perfect knowledge. He was led by unbreakable clarity of values. And those values forged steel in his mind, enough to carry him through chaos that would have shattered lesser men. That's the kind of mindset creation demands, not shallow optimism, not surface-level strategy, but a deep, burning inner compass that makes surrender impossible. And the beautiful, brutal truth is this: no one can give that to you. You must go into the darkness of your own uncertainty and forge it. Stop entertaining weak thoughts. Stop cuddling with excuses. Stop feeding your mind with mediocrity and expecting excellence to show up at your doorstep. You can't binge distraction and then cry about your lack of clarity. You can't scroll endlessly through other people's lives and then wonder why yours feels stuck. The mind reflects what you train it to absorb. What you watch, what you hear, what you say, it all matters. Everything is training. Everything is programming. Every single input is either a weapon in your arsenal or a weight around your neck. So, ask yourself now, without flinching, who are you becoming by default? Not by intent, but by habit? Who are you becoming based on what you allow into your mental world? What kind of mind are you building when you open your eyes every morning and reach for distraction before direction? You have to guard your mind like a fortress. And not just protect it, but train it. Feed it with focus. Fuel it with vision. Discipline it with repetition. Because the mind is not a static entity. It is a living, malleable, hungry organism, and if you don't train it with intention, it will train itself through chaos. The human brain is the most powerful creation engine in the known universe, but it is also a mirror of your standards. Raise the standard, and the mind will rise with it. Lower it, and it will decay in comfort. Your mind is your most valuable real estate. Stop renting it out to fear. You don't need to feel like a superhero. You don't need to fake unshakable confidence. What you need is a reason stronger than your fear. That's the engine of all creation. A reason that makes hesitation feel like betrayal. A reason that drags you out of bed when comfort whispers, "Stay here. You're safe." Chapter 3. Belief, the inner code of manifestation. You can study every tactic, master every system, read every book on productivity, performance, or purpose, but until belief takes root as your core operating system, nothing will shift at the level that truly matters. Belief is not just a mental attitude, it is the command center of your reality. It is the unseen architecture beneath every action you take and every decision you avoid. Belief is the code that runs beneath the surface, dictating how you show up, what you tolerate, and whether you rise or retreat when resistance appears. Without belief, strategy collapses. Without belief, vision fades. Without belief, effort becomes mechanical, dry, disconnected from impact. But with belief, true belief, your entire world begins to reorganize itself around the certainty of what you've decided is already real. Belief does not require evidence. In fact, it usually begins in its absence. The world teaches us to wait for proof before we proceed, to demand validation before we commit. But the individuals who alter history are those who understand the order is reversed. Belief must come first. You step forward not because you're guaranteed success, but because you've become someone who no longer asks permission from the external world to determine what's possible. You act not because the outcome is certain, but because your identity has evolved into someone who does not negotiate with fear. You walk into the unknown not blindly, but boldly, because belief makes the unknown familiar. Think of it this way: every human being is a walking broadcast tower. Whatever you believe most deeply, you project outward into the world through your words, your posture, your decisions, your energy. And the world responds not to what you say you want, but to what you actually believe you deserve. If deep down, you believe that success is for others, that wealth is for the elite, that power is reserved for the chosen few, then no amount of ambition on the surface can override that inner script. You will subconsciously sabotage yourself to match your internal ceiling. That's why belief is not a motivational slogan. It is a reprogramming of your entire internal operating system. Look back through time and you will see this truth in every legendary creator. Nikola Tesla believed he could transmit energy through the air when the rest of the world laughed at the idea. His mind was decades ahead of the infrastructure available, and yet he moved forward anyway because his belief wasn't sourced from consensus, it was sourced from vision. Howard Schultz believed he could bring European-style coffee culture to America at a time when no one cared about espresso. People told him no one would pay $5 for coffee. They told him it wasn't scalable. They told him to stick to safe business models. But belief carried him forward. Not arrogance, not fantasy, but a level of internal clarity that made opposition irrelevant. The great creators are not delusional. They're simply unshakable. They understand that belief is not about denying reality, it's about reshaping it. And reshaping reality takes repetition. It takes a process. You don't just wake up one morning and suddenly feel like a god. You build belief brick by brick, through repetition, through decisions that align with the person you want to become, even before you feel like you've earned that identity. And every time you act in alignment with a future version of yourself, you send a message to your brain. This is who I am now. Do it enough times, and that belief becomes your new baseline. The problem is that most people wait for belief to arrive. They treat it like a guest that might someday knock on their door. But belief is not something you find. It's something you construct. You build it by doing what's difficult. You build it by deciding that your current circumstances do not define you. You build it by choosing to show up as the highest version of yourself, even when there's no applause, no feedback, no external reward. Belief is built in silence. It's built in early mornings when no one's watching. It's built in late nights when the results haven't arrived. It's built in the gap between who you've been and who you're becoming. But make no mistake, once belief is installed, everything changes. You stop asking if it's possible. You stop wondering if it's worth it. You stop negotiating with fear. Instead, your focus sharpens. Your posture shifts. Your time becomes sacred. You start moving like someone who knows it's already done, Because at a deeper level, it is. Belief collapses timelines. It accelerates outcomes. It magnetizes opportunities that match your frequency. This is not mysticism. This is the law of congruence. The world reflects back to you who you are being. Not what you hope for. Not what you write down in your journal. Who you are. And you can't fake that. You can't fake belief. You can say the right words, post the right quotes, even mimic the moves of successful people, but if your internal code is still wired with fear, scarcity, self-doubt, and guilt, then your results will expose you. That's why belief must be internalized. It has to be lived. It has to be practiced like a martial art. You train it. You refine it. You challenge it. And over time, it becomes who you are, not a mask you wear, but a core you embody. The tragedy is that most people never even get to the starting line of belief. They've been told their whole lives to be realistic, to play it safe, to aim small so they won't be disappointed. They've inherited the mental software of generations who survived, not thrived. And they carry that inheritance into their own decisions. But you don't have to live like that. You can choose to rewrite the code. You can choose to uninstall every thought pattern that's keeping you small. You can decide, right now, that belief is not optional, it is required. And let's be clear, belief doesn't mean you'll never feel fear. It means fear no longer dictates your pace. Belief doesn't mean you always win. It means you always learn, always grow, always return to the field. Belief doesn't eliminate resistance, it overrides it. And once you understand that belief is a weapon, you'll start sharpening it with intention. You'll stop feeding your doubts. You'll stop tolerating the stories that say you're not ready. You'll begin to audit your internal dialogue the way a king audits his court, because you'll realize that every voice inside your head is either building your kingdom or tearing it down. You want to create something that lasts? Then start with belief. Not shallow hope, but rooted identity. Not surface motivation, but soul-level certainty. Make your internal world so strong that no rejection, no delay, no failure can shake your resolve. And when that belief becomes permanent, when it becomes a code running through every cell of your being, you'll find that the external world starts to bend, not because you controlled it, but because you mastered yourself. And that is where real creation begins. From within. Chapter 4. Clarity, the cutting edge of creation. In a world drowning in noise, overstimulation, and contradiction, clarity has become more than just an advantage. It has become a weapon. Without clarity, your energy is fragmented, your focus is diffused, your life becomes a scattered mosaic of half-built bridges and unfinished symphonies. Clarity is not a luxury for the chosen few. It is a requirement for those who want to create something real, something permanent, something that doesn't collapse the moment pressure is applied. Without clarity, all ambition decays into confusion. All effort dissolves into exhaustion. And you will find yourself running endlessly, working harder and harder, while making almost no progress, because movement without direction is the most deceptive form of stagnation. Clarity begins with brutal honesty. Not with vision boards, not with clever slogans, but with the unfiltered, often uncomfortable process of facing yourself. You cannot design a future while lying to yourself about the present. You cannot build a life of purpose while pretending to be fulfilled in a job, a role, a relationship, or a routine that drains the very essence of who you are. You want clarity? Then start telling the truth. Not just to others, but to yourself. Start asking better questions. Questions that cut through the noise, the guilt, the fear of disappointing people who were never meant to walk your path in the first place. The truth is, most people are afraid of clarity because they know it requires change. They avoid the question, what do I really want? Because they know the answer will demand a death. The death of their comfort zone, the death of their current identity, the death of the small life they've built to survive instead of thrive. But without that death, there can be no rebirth. Without that confrontation, there can be no expansion. You will stay in cycles, relationships, environments, and mindsets that quietly strangle you because ambiguity feels safer than the responsibility of knowing exactly what you must do. You want to manifest real results? Then you must define them down to the detail. Vagueness is the enemy of creation. You cannot aim for success, freedom, or happiness without defining exactly what those terms mean for you, not for your friends, not for your parents, not for the algorithm, but for you. And once you define them, you must begin aligning your time, your resources, your attention, and your environment with that definition. Anything less is self-sabotage wrapped in productivity. And don't confuse motion with clarity. The internet is full of people who are busy but aimless, hustling without a compass, chasing without direction, grinding out results that mean nothing because they never stop to ask if the mountain they're climbing is even theirs. There's no glory in reaching the top of the wrong summit. There's no victory in becoming efficient at building someone else's dream. And there's no peace in achieving goals that are misaligned with your soul. Clarity demands that you pause long enough to strip away every borrowed belief, every inherited expectation, every artificial metric of success, and ask one terrifyingly simple question: what do I actually want to create with my life? When you answer that with ruthless precision, the universe begins to rearrange itself in response. Not magically, but practically. Your mind stops chasing distractions and starts seeking alignment. Your nervous system calms because indecision is the source of anxiety, not pressure. Your relationships begin to shift because people can finally feel the intensity of your direction. And that direction, when backed by clarity, becomes magnetic. You stop chasing opportunities and begin attracting them, not because of luck, but because certainty is rare. And in a world of uncertainty, rare energy becomes valuable. Think of Steve Jobs. Clarity was his compass, his blade, his advantage. He didn't chase trends. He didn't ask what the market wanted. He decided what the market needed, and he built it with obsession. That clarity made him dangerous. That clarity made him different. And yes, it also made him polarizing. But no one reshapes the world while trying to be agreeable. Clarity will cost you approval. It will cost you comfort. It may cost you relationships with people who only supported you when you were easy to define and easy to control. But it will give you something far more powerful than popularity. It will give you precision. And precision creates results. The people who manifest extraordinary results are not always the most talented, the most educated, or the most connected. But they are almost always the most clear. They know what they're building. They know why it matters. They know who they are and who they are not. And because of that, their decisions carry weight. Their actions are intentional. Their time is sacred. They don't waste energy fighting battles that don't move their mission forward. They don't chase after everything that glitters. They stay the course, not because it's easy, but because clarity makes discipline easier to endure. Clarity also protects you from self-sabotage. When you're unclear, you procrastinate, not because you're lazy, but because your nervous system doesn't feel safe moving forward into ambiguity. The brain is wired for survival, and nothing feels more dangerous than investing effort into a direction you haven't defined. Clarity gives your mind a target. It gives your energy a purpose. It gives your pain a context. Without that, you will retreat the moment things get hard, not because you're weak, but because your pain has no meaning. But when clarity is present, pain becomes progress. Resistance becomes a signal. You know what you're fighting for. You understand the price and decide that it's worth it. So how do you build clarity? Not by brainstorming, not by fantasizing, but by deciding. Decision is the father of clarity. When you decide, you cut away all other options. That's what the word literally means, to cut off. You choose a direction not because it's guaranteed, but because you refuse to waste another year pretending to be confused. Most confusion is not a lack of information. It's a lack of courage to choose. So choose. Decide what you want to build. Decide who you want to become. Decide what you are no longer willing to tolerate in your life. And once you decide, act. Immediately, imperfectly, but consistently. Don't wait for perfect clarity. Clarity is not a lightning bolt. It's a flame that grows as you move. Every step you take toward alignment makes the next step easier to see. But the first step? That one requires faith. It requires you to move even when the path isn't fully visible. It requires you to stop asking for permission and start leading your own life. Because if you don't lead it, someone else will. And you will wake up one day wondering why the results you're living don't match the vision you once had. The answer will be simple: you never got clear. But now you know better. Now you understand that clarity is not optional. It is essential. And not just for achievement, but for peace, for alignment, for meaning. Without clarity, even success becomes a prison. But with clarity, even the struggle becomes sacred. Because you know what you're building, why you're building it, and who you must become to see it through. Chapter 5. Vision, building the world before it exists. Every great monument ever built, every revolution ever ignited, every movement that reshaped the course of history began the same way. Not with a hammer, not with a law, not even with a plan, but with a vision, intangible, invisible, a mental image so sharp and so vivid that it burned brighter than the limitations of the present moment. Vision is not a luxury for the artistic or the entrepreneurial. It is the most essential faculty of any creator. Without vision, you are building blind. Without vision, your actions are mechanical. You can be consistent, you can be disciplined, you can wake up at 5 a.m. and read every self-help book on earth, but if you do not have a clearly articulated and emotionally charged picture of the future you are creating, your work will eventually become hollow, your discipline will decay, and your soul will rebel against the grind of a life that feels directionless. Vision is not about seeing what is. It's about seeing what could be, and then deciding with unwavering resolve that you will become the bridge between that image and reality. It is an act of rebellion against the limitations of your current surroundings. It is a declaration that what already exists is not all that will ever exist. Visionaries are not delusional optimists. They are radical realists. They see clearly that the present is insufficient, that the current level of progress is unacceptable, that the status quo must be disrupted, and they allow that dissatisfaction to fuel a relentless pursuit of something greater. Not someday, but now. The dangerous truth is this: most people are not lacking in ability, they are lacking in vision. They are living in response to the present instead of in alignment with the future. They wake up each day reacting to problems, reacting to pressure, reacting to noise, but they have no internal picture pulling them forward. And when you are not pulled by a powerful vision, you will always be pushed around by your circumstances. You will live reactively, drifting from task to task, opportunity to opportunity, never fully knowing what deserves your full attention, because you have not committed to a future that demands your allegiance. And yet vision is not something you find lying in the road. It is something you construct, deliberately, with clarity and imagination. It is the product of deep reflection, brutal honesty, and creative courage. You must go beyond the surface-level desires of fame, wealth, or ease and ask yourself, what is the world I am here to build? What does it look like? What does it feel like? Who am I in that world? What kind of impact am I making? What do my days consist of? What kind of energy do I bring into every room I walk into? These are not fluffy, motivational questions. These are design parameters for your destiny. If you don't define them, then you are left to default into someone else's agenda. The legends of history understood this. Think of Martin Luther King Jr. His power came not just from rhetoric, but from vision. He painted a picture so vivid, so emotionally charged, that it outlived bullets, threats, and time itself. I have a dream, he said. Not a budget. Not a 5-step plan. A dream. A vision of children judged by character, not color. A vision of unity in a world of division. And it was that vision, not the violence of the time, that shaped the future. That is the power of a vision that has become non-negotiable. It doesn't just move people, it moves time. Or consider Elon Musk, a man ridiculed for suggesting that electric cars could be luxurious, high-performance machines. When others were thinking about marginal improvements in existing transportation systems, he was envisioning Mars. His companies were not built on safe predictions, they were built on a vision of what the future should look like, and then executed through an obsession with detail and relentless iteration. Vision was the foundation, but it did not remain abstract. It became concrete, practical, visible, because he refused to let the current limitations define what was possible. That is your task now, to create such a vivid, powerful and emotionally rooted picture of your future that it begins to overwrite your past. A vision that becomes so clear that every choice you make today is either a step toward it or a betrayal of it. You cannot afford to be vague. Vague vision produces vague results. You must speak in specifics. See it in detail. Smell the environment. Feel the emotion of living inside your future reality. Because your subconscious mind cannot tell the difference between what is vividly imagined and what is experienced. That's why vision is not fantasy, it is neurobiology. It is a tool for training your nervous system to expect what does not yet exist. And the more you rehearse that future, the more your behavior will begin to align with it. You will start to make choices that serve the future, not just the present. You will start to say no to distractions, not because you're disciplined, but because you are possessed by where you're going. And here's the part they don't tell you: your current life might need to collapse for your vision to be realized. Your environment may resist it. People in your current circle may not recognize you anymore. The old version of you, comfortable, predictable, easy to digest, will start to die. And with that death comes grief. Not everyone will celebrate the version of you that emerges from the fire of your future. But if you are truly committed to your vision, you will not need their applause. You will not need validation. You will not slow down to explain yourself to those who've decided to stay asleep. Because vision, when it truly takes root, becomes a fire so strong that it consumes every lesser excuse. But it only works if it's yours. Not borrowed. Not copied. Not downloaded from some influencer's Instagram post. Your vision must come from your own inner knowing. It must speak to the deepest parts of who you are. It must be aligned with your values, your gifts, your experiences, and your hunger. Otherwise, you'll burn out trying to live someone else's fantasy. But when the vision is yours, when it's born from soul and forged through thought, it will give you a stamina that hustle can't fake. It will carry you through failure, through criticism, through the silence of no results. Because you won't just be working towards something, you'll be becoming someone. So the question is no longer, what do I want? That's too shallow. The real question is, what am I here to build that doesn't exist yet? What does my future demand of me? What will I regret not bringing into this world when my time is up? Because whether you like it or not, time is passing. The future is coming. The only question is, will it be one you designed or one you drifted into? You are not here to live reactively. You are here to create proactively. You are here to bend the future toward your vision through daily alignment, through relentless execution, through uncompromising conviction. And it begins now. Not when the conditions are perfect. Not when the money shows up. Not when the doubt disappears. Vision is not something you wait for. It's something you choose, and then you build, every single day, until what you once imagined becomes the reality you live and breathe. That is the law of creation. And vision is its first blueprint. Chapter 6: Purpose, Turning Pain into Power. Purpose is not found in calm waters. It is not discovered on a beach with a journal, nor is it handed to you in a seminar or whispered to you by the universe in a moment of aesthetic peace. Purpose is carved from the collision between who you are and what you've survived. It rises not from inspiration, but from impact, from the places where life bruised you, broke you, tested you, and then dared you to rise from the ashes without losing your fire. Everyone wants clarity about their purpose, but few are willing to go where purpose is actually born, into the furnace of personal truth, into the dark corridors of experience where most would rather close the door and forget. But if you're serious about creating something real, about manifesting results that last, then you must face one simple fact: your purpose lives inside your pain. The idea that purpose is soft or vague is a lie sold by people afraid of responsibility. True purpose is not soft. It is brutal. It requires that you stop performing for approval and start confronting the question of why you are here, not in theory, but in raw, undeniable reality. You want to know what you're here to do? Then ask yourself, what have you survived that others didn't? What do you understand through suffering, through failure, through loss, through heartbreak, through rejection, through pain so deep it changed your very DNA? Because that is where purpose hides, in the parts of your story you're still trying to forget, in the wounds you're afraid to own, in the truths you think make you weak. But the paradox is this: what you think disqualifies you is actually the evidence that you've been prepared. Your purpose is not found in your perfection. It's found in your transformation. And transformation is the child of adversity. Nobody grows in comfort. No one becomes anything meaningful while clinging to ease. Purpose is forged when you stop asking, "Why did this happen to me?" and start asking, "What can I do with it?" Purpose is what emerges when you decide that your pain will not be wasted, that you will turn your scars into stories, your burdens into blueprints, your breakdowns into breakthroughs for others. That's where real power comes from. Not from pretending to have it all together, but from mining your life for truth so raw, so undeniable, that it awakens not only your own soul but the souls of everyone who comes near you. Think of Viktor Frankl, a man who endured the unimaginable: starvation, torture, dehumanization inside Nazi concentration camps. He watched his family perish, saw evil up close, and faced death on a daily basis. And yet, in that unspeakable darkness, he did not collapse into despair. Instead, he found meaning. He realized that even in suffering, especially in suffering, man can choose his response. He found purpose not in spite of pain but through it. He went on to write one of the most powerful psychological books of the 20th century, not because he had a theory about purpose, but because he lived it. He showed us that even in the most horrific conditions, the human spirit can find direction, and that meaning is not something given, it's something created. Your purpose is not optional. It is your compass, your engine, your foundation. Without it, discipline feels like punishment, effort feels like sacrifice, and life becomes a series of empty rituals. But with purpose, everything shifts. Discipline becomes devotion. Work becomes worship. Struggle becomes sacred. And every morning, you rise not because it's easy, not because you're motivated, but because your life matters. Purpose is what gets you back up when nothing else makes sense. It is the voice that whispers, "Get up. Keep going. This matters." Even when the money isn't there. Even when the results haven't arrived. Even when the world isn't clapping. Because you're not here for applause. You're here to build something eternal. And yet, most people are running from their purpose because they don't want to revisit their pain. They numb it, avoid it, hide behind productivity, behind success, behind busyness, pretending they're too distracted to go deep, but in truth, they're afraid of what they'll find if they dig too far. But hear this: your pain already happened. The event already passed. The trauma already occurred. The question is not whether it happened. The question is whether you'll let it define you or refine you. Will it make you bitter, or will it make you brave? Will you let it bury you, or will you use it to elevate others? Purpose isn't about you. It starts with you, yes, but if it ends with you, it's ego. Real purpose is always bigger. It has weight. It stretches beyond your comfort and demands that your life become a vessel for something more than pleasure. Purpose says, take what hurt you, take what shaped you, take what nearly broke you, and build a lighthouse out of it. Show others the way. That's when you become powerful. That's when your work becomes a legacy. That's when you no longer need validation because your life is now a contribution. Think of Oprah Winfrey. Born into poverty, abused as a child, silenced by trauma, overlooked by an industry that saw her race and gender as liabilities. She had every reason to fold. Every excuse to fade into anonymity. But she didn't. She turned her pain into purpose. She built a platform that gave voice to the voiceless, turned shame into strength, and transformed vulnerability into a tool of global empowerment. Not because she wanted to be famous. Because she knew that her life, if used fully, could become an instrument for healing. And that is the true power of purpose. It turns your life into medicine, not just for yourself, but for the world. If you want to live with power, then stop asking how to avoid pain, and start asking how to use it. Your wounds are not a disqualification. They are your credentials. They mean you've been somewhere. You've fought. You've bled. You've earned the right to lead, not because you've always won, but because you've refused to stay down. That's what purpose demands. It doesn't require that you be perfect. It requires that you be real, that you be honest, and that you be unwilling to let your life pass by without doing something with everything you've been given, even the hard parts. So what is your pain asking you to do? What story are you afraid to share? What truth have you buried because you're afraid it makes you weak, when in fact, it's the key to everything strong inside you? That's your clue. That's your path. That's where your purpose lives, not in what's easy, but in what's honest. And when you find it, when you finally stop running from yourself and begin building with your scars instead of against them, you become unstoppable. Because a person walking in purpose does not fear failure. A person walking in purpose cannot be manipulated. A person walking in purpose can survive storms that would destroy the uncommitted. Purpose makes you dangerous, in the best way. It makes you immune to distraction. It makes your presence undeniable. It turns your life into a force that no one can ignore. And most of all, it gives you peace, not because life is perfect, but because you know why you're here. Chapter 7. Discipline, the fire that forgets your feelings. Discipline is not motivation. Discipline does not care about how you feel, what mood you're in, what time you went to bed, or how much resistance you're carrying on your shoulders today. Discipline is not emotional. It is not romantic. It does not come with fanfare or applause. Discipline is cold steel. It is the silent, consistent force that shapes dreams into reality long after the passion has faded and the novelty has worn off. And if you want to create something that lasts, if you are serious about moving from intention to manifestation, then you must understand that discipline is the furnace in which all meaningful results are forged. You can be inspired, you can be gifted, you can be overflowing with vision and purpose, but none of it matters if you cannot bring your body, your mind, and your energy into consistent alignment with your values when it's inconvenient. Discipline is what separates the curious from the committed. It is the threshold that filters out those who dabble from those who decide. And make no mistake, discipline is a decision. It is the daily, deliberate choice to do what matters, especially when you don't feel like it. That is the price. Not talent, not timing, not luck. Discipline. The world is full of people who start strong and finish nowhere. The gym memberships, the half-written books, the abandoned startups, the silent podcasts, the empty blogs, the dusty vision boards. And behind each of those graveyards of potential is the same ghost, someone who thought discipline would always feel good. But here's the truth they never tell you. It almost never feels good. In fact, some of your greatest breakthroughs will begin on the days you feel most unmotivated. Because those are the days when your character is tested. And it is character, not talent, that determines whether you finish the race. You think Edison wanted to keep going after thousands of failed experiments? You think David Goggins wanted to run on broken legs, again and again, for miles at a time? You think Simone Biles becomes the greatest gymnast in the world by doing only what feels fun? Absolutely not. What they all understood, what every creator who has ever finished something understands, is that discipline is the ability to do the hard thing, especially when you're emotionally or physically tired, when the world is silent, when progress is invisible, when momentum disappears, when every part of you is whispering, "Rest now, you've done enough." But discipline doesn't negotiate with comfort. It doesn't need to feel ready. It doesn't require validation. It doesn't wait for alignment of the stars or ideal conditions or divine signs. It moves. It gets up. It repeats. It shows up every day whether you feel like a champion or a failure. And through that repetition, you become something that motivation could never make you: consistent, dangerous, respected, unstoppable. The culture today is addicted to short-term dopamine. We want results instantly. We want impact without effort. We want transformation without the trauma of repetition. We're trained by algorithms that reward attention but punish endurance. And so, most people never master anything, not because they lack ability, but because they lack stamina. But if you can become the rare person who stays, who works, who executes with consistency over years, you will rise above 99% of the world. Not because you're more gifted, but because you're more committed. Discipline is the bridge between vision and results. You can talk about your goals for years. You can dream of building a business, writing a book, launching a movement, becoming a leader. But until those dreams are backed by daily, non-negotiable, uncomfortable action, they remain fantasy. Dreams without discipline are lies we tell ourselves to feel better about doing nothing. But when discipline becomes the standard, not the exception, you stop relying on inspiration, and you start becoming inevitable. And the moment you stop tying your discipline to your feelings, you become free. Most people think freedom means doing what you want when you want, but that's chaos, not freedom. True freedom comes from doing what is necessary, regardless of how you feel, because your life has become aligned with a cause greater than your comfort. Discipline is the door to that freedom. It gives you control over your choices, your time, your energy. It builds confidence from the inside out because every time you follow through on a commitment, you send a message to yourself: I can trust me. And that kind of trust is unshakable. That kind of confidence cannot be given by applause. It can only be earned through action. So ask yourself, what are you avoiding because it doesn't feel good? What goal have you postponed because the initial excitement wore off? What dream have you buried beneath excuses that sound logical but are really just fear wearing a disguise? It's not about whether you have the time. It's about whether you have the discipline to use the time you already have. Every hour is a vote. Every decision is a signal to the universe that you're serious or that you're not. And yes, it's hard. It's supposed to be. That's the point. If it were easy, everyone would have the body, the brand, the book, the business, the bank account, the influence. But most people don't. Not because they lack the idea, but because they lack the ability to sit down, focus, execute, and repeat day after day without needing it to feel amazing, without quitting when the applause fades, without pivoting the moment it gets boring or hard or lonely. But if you're willing to endure that boring, painful repetition, if you can stay when others run, you become a force. You become rare. And rare is always valuable. Discipline is the ultimate form of self-respect. It says, I care enough about my future that I will not betray it for short-term pleasure. I care enough about my craft that I will show up for it even when no one is watching. I care enough about my vision that I will sacrifice who I used to be in order to become the person who can carry it. And once that discipline is embedded into your identity, it no longer feels like punishment. It becomes purposeful. You stop dreading the work. You start craving it, because the daily grind becomes the ritual that connects you to the future you've chosen. That's the real power of discipline. Not just what it helps you build, but who it helps you become. And once it becomes part of you, the world will look at what you've built and call it talent. But you'll know the truth. It wasn't talent. It was time. It was focus. It was sacrifice. It was discipline, the fire that forgot your feelings and forged your future anyway. Chapter 8. Action, the currency of reality. You can think, dream, visualize, affirm, believe, plan, and hope all you want. But if you do not act, you do not create. Action is the final line between desire and reality. It is the great separator. The universal currency that the world understands and responds to. Everything else, your passion, your potential, your ideas, your intentions, none of it holds value until it is converted into action. This is not metaphor. This is not philosophy. This is execution. This is how life works. The marketplace, the universe, the world at large, they do not pay for ideas. They do not respond to thought alone. They respond to movement, to action, to things that can be seen, measured, touched, built, shared, bought, tested, broken, rebuilt, and scaled. Until it exists in the world as something real, your idea, no matter how brilliant, is just mental vapor. And here's where most people stay stuck. They fall in love with the idea of what they could build, but they never engage the uncomfortable, often chaotic, unpredictable reality of what it actually takes to bring something to life. They say they're planning. They say they're preparing. They say they're learning, researching, perfecting. But behind all that sophisticated language is the simple truth: they're hesitating. They're afraid. Not always consciously. Sometimes they're even convinced they're progressing. But the real test is simple. What have you done? Not what do you intend to do, not what are you working on behind the scenes, but what have you brought into the light? What have you finished? Because it's easy to get addicted to the high of potential. It's easy to scroll, to study, to consume more information and feel like you're making progress. It's easy to stay in the realm of thought, where there are no critics, no results to judge, no risk of failure, no exposure. But that is not creation. That is comfort in disguise. Creation begins the moment you start acting, the moment you take the first step toward building what only exists in your head. And yes, the moment you act, you make yourself vulnerable. Vulnerable to failure, to feedback, to embarrassment, to imperfection. But you also make yourself available to power, to opportunity, to growth, to alignment with the laws of momentum that reward the movers, the doers, the builders. Every single person you admire, every company that changed the world, every legacy that outlived its creator, started with someone who decided to stop thinking about it and move. They didn't wait until it was perfect. They didn't wait until the timing was ideal. They didn't ask for permission. They acted. And in that action, they gained what no amount of study could give them: feedback, clarity, refinement, resilience, and the irreplaceable momentum that comes from actually doing the work. You don't find your voice by thinking. You find it by speaking. You don't find your purpose by reading about it. You find it by engaging with the world, failing, adjusting, showing up again and again. Action is the laboratory of growth. Think of Walt Disney. His first studio went bankrupt. He was told again and again that his ideas were impossible, too expensive, too strange, too childish. He could have stopped at the first rejection. He could have folded when the money disappeared. But instead, he kept acting. He kept creating. He kept building what others could not yet see. And because of that, he didn't just make films. He created a cultural mythology that redefined entertainment. His ideas didn't change the world. His actions did. And yours will too, but only if you begin. Stop waiting for confidence. Confidence is not a prerequisite for action. It is the result of action. You don't need to believe in yourself fully to take the first step. You just need to move. And then move again. And then keep moving until belief catches up. Action breeds clarity, which builds belief, which compounds into results. The formula is simple but not easy. And that's why most people never do it. They want to feel inspired before they act. But the highest performers, the most consistent creators, the real movers of the world, they act until they feel inspired, not the other way around. And make no mistake, you will never outthink fear. You will never think your way into confidence. You cannot read your way into mastery. Action is the only gateway. You must make the call. Write the draft. Post the content. Launch the product. Have the conversation. Show up and fail. Show up and learn. Show up again and again until the world has no choice but to acknowledge your presence. The ones who win are not the ones who wait. They are the ones who build, brick by brick, even when no one is watching. And that's the part most people don't understand. Real action is lonely. Especially in the beginning. No one celebrates you when you start. No one sees the late nights, the quiet doubt, the invisible work. But that's where greatness is shaped. Not in public, but in private. In the small, repeated acts that stack over time into a structure so powerful, so undeniable, that the world finally takes notice and says, "Where did this come from?" And the answer will be, it came from years of action you never saw. So stop lying to yourself about why you're not ready. You're not stuck. You're hesitating. And hesitation is a decision. You don't need more ideas. You need execution. You don't need another motivational video. You need movement. Every result you want already exists on the other side of a series of decisions you're afraid to make. But fear is not the signal to stop. It is the signal that what you're approaching matters. Lean into that. Take the step. Send the message. Ship the product. Make it real. Because no matter how beautiful the idea is in your mind, it means nothing until it touches reality. Until someone can see it, use it, feel it, be changed by it. The distance between vision and impact is crossed only by action. No exceptions. No shortcuts. The game belongs to the ones who move. Chapter 9. Gratitude, anchoring power in the present. Gratitude is not soft. It is not passive. It is not something to be scribbled down out of obligation in a morning routine checklist. It is not an Instagram caption on a sunset or a temporary feeling that flickers during holidays and then fades. Gratitude in its truest form is one of the most potent forces of stability and strength available to a human being. It is the anchor that holds you in the present when your mind is tempted to spiral into fear about the future or regret about the past. It is the discipline of attention that brings power back into this exact moment, the only moment where creation can actually happen. Without gratitude, even success becomes empty. Without gratitude, achievement feels like chasing a moving target you never quite reach. But when gratitude is activated with intention, it becomes your ground wire. It centers you, focuses you, reminds you that you are not lacking, you are building. And you are already standing on a foundation that many only dream of. It is easy to dismiss gratitude as a luxury of the content or the privileged. But this is a misunderstanding. Gratitude is not the result of abundance. It is the condition that allows abundance to expand. You will never feel enough, do enough, or become enough if your internal narrative is always scanning for what's missing. And make no mistake, the human mind, left untrained, will always default to scarcity. It will always focus on the gap, not the gain. It will always search for what's not working, for who's doing better, for what you haven't yet done. That mindset, if left unchecked, becomes a poison that infects your progress. You start resenting the very life you once prayed for. You start overlooking the miracles embedded in your everyday reality. And you lose connection to the truth that you already have more power in your possession than most will ever fully tap into. Gratitude is not about denying pain. It is not about pretending everything is perfect. It is about holding two truths at once, acknowledging what needs to grow while recognizing what already exists. It is a mental muscle, one that must be built with repetition and intentionality. Because in the chaos of modern life, it is far easier to see what's wrong than to appreciate what's right. But when you train yourself to shift your attention, even for a moment, onto what is already working, onto what you have endured, onto who you have become despite everything that tried to break you, you start to reclaim your agency. You start to regain momentum. You stop acting like a victim of your circumstances and begin showing up as a creator again. Look at history. The greatest leaders, the most grounded warriors, the most enduring creators were not just driven, they were grateful. Marcus Aurelius, Emperor of Rome, facing the weight of ruling an empire and the pressure of constant war, wrote meditations not about domination, but about perspective. He wrote about appreciating the sun, the breath, the body, the opportunity to wake up and serve again. His gratitude was not casual, it was practiced. It was a shield against despair. It was a weapon of clarity. Because when the world is burning, gratitude is what keeps you from burning with it. It reminds you, you still have something to work with. And from that truth, you act, not from desperation, but from awareness. Because without gratitude, you will live constantly stuck in what's next. That mindset will enslave you. You will climb one mountain and immediately chase another. You will reach goals and feel numb. You will manifest results and feel unsatisfied. Because you've trained your system to only recognize progress in the form of the next milestone. You've programmed your mind to delay peace until arrival, and arrival never actually comes when your brain is wired for dissatisfaction. You must break that cycle. You must teach your nervous system to feel wholeness now. Not later. Not someday when. And that is where gratitude lives. It's in the fact that you woke up today. That you have a body capable of movement. That your mind can generate new thoughts. That your voice can speak into existence something that didn't exist before. That your struggle has carved depth into your character. That you have access to creation at this very moment. Most of the world is not free. Most of the world is surviving. And you, if you're reading this, listening to this, absorbing this, have been given something sacred, choice. Gratitude starts by recognizing that choice. And then choosing intentionally to act from it. Because when you're grounded in gratitude, you stop grasping. You stop chasing people, ideas, outcomes, and timelines out of panic. You begin building from presence, not panic. You begin leading from sufficiency, not desperation. And that shift in energy is not just spiritual, it's strategic. People can feel it. Opportunities align with it. Creation flows through it. You become magnetic, not because you're pretending everything is okay, but because you've become someone who sees the power in what already is and acts on it, instead of always needing more before moving. Gratitude also protects you from the ego. When you begin to create results, when the recognition comes, when the momentum builds, it is gratitude that keeps you centered. It reminds you of where you started. It humbles you in the best way. It keeps you from believing the lie that you are doing this alone. Because no matter how powerful you become, no matter how high you rise, your story is interwoven with the help of others, with the timing of grace, with the unseen forces that moved in your favor. Gratitude makes you stronger, not weaker. It sharpens your focus, not softens it. It reminds you of why you began in the first place, and without that remembrance, discipline becomes punishment and success becomes ego fuel. So don't treat gratitude like a morning ritual. Treat it like a discipline of perception. Build it into the structure of how you think. Let it rewire your filters. Let it become your antidote to anxiety, your recalibration when progress feels too slow, your resistance to the culture of constant dissatisfaction. Because when you act from gratitude, you're no longer reacting to lack. You're building from fullness. And fullness attracts. Fullness leads. Fullness has gravity. This is how you balance the hunger for more with the power of now. You don't surrender the vision. You don't stop evolving. But you stop waiting for results to feel peace. You stop outsourcing joy to the future. And in doing so, you increase your power in the present, the only place where anything can be built. Chapter 10. Adaptability, Evolve or Expire. Adaptability is not optional. It is not a soft skill. It is not a corporate buzzword or a convenient quality to have when things go wrong. Adaptability is survival. It is relevance. It is creation in real time. If you are unwilling to adapt, unwilling to evolve, unwilling to bend with the winds of change, then it doesn't matter how disciplined you are, how powerful your vision is, how strong your belief or how relentless your action, because the world will keep moving, and you will become obsolete while still grinding away at a version of reality that no longer exists. Adaptability is the unspoken rule behind every creator who has stood the test of time. It is the trait that separates the fallen giants from the ones who endure. Because no matter how clear your strategy, no matter how strong your initial idea, the world will change, and if you do not change with it, it will leave you behind. Most people fall in love with their methods. They fall in love with the way they've always done things, with the structure that brought them early results, with the system that once worked. But what they forget is that what brought them success in one season can destroy them in the next. The speed of life has accelerated. The environment around you is evolving whether you like it or not. Technology is changing. Markets are changing. Human behavior is changing. If your mind is not flexible, if your strategy is not malleable, if your ego is not capable of letting go of the familiar, then your potential will suffocate inside a box that you refuse to question. The most dangerous phrase in the vocabulary of a once promising creator is, "This is just how I do it." You have to learn how to pivot without panic. You have to train your nervous system not just for persistence but for fluidity. Yes, persistence is essential, but persistence without flexibility becomes delusion. You'll find yourself grinding away at a dead system because you've mistaken rigidity for strength. But true strength is not stiff. True strength is responsive. It is able to shift when the environment shifts, to reframe when the data changes, to adapt without losing identity. Because there's a difference between adapting your strategy and compromising your soul. The former is evolution. The latter is surrender. And knowing the difference is what makes you powerful. Look at history. The companies and creators who thrive over decades are not the ones who built the strongest walls. They're the ones who knew how to reinvent. Netflix evolved from DVD rentals to streaming to original production. Apple went from computers to an entire ecosystem of lifestyle technology. These brands weren't just lucky. They were responsive. They had the humility to let go of what worked yesterday in order to stay relevant today. The moment you believe your current way is the only way, you've already lost. And this doesn't just apply to business. It applies to your habits, your identity, your relationships, your routines. If you keep doing things the same way and expect a new result, you're not being loyal to your vision. You're being lazy in disguise. Adaptability begins with awareness. You have to stay awake. You have to pay attention. Not just to the external signals, but to your own internal state. You have to ask yourself consistently, is this still working? Is this still aligned? Is this action still taking me where I need to go? Or am I repeating it just because it's familiar? The enemy of adaptability is not failure, it's comfort. It's the seductive lie that because something once worked, it will always work. But comfort is not the same as peace. Peace comes from alignment. Comfort comes from fear pretending to be stability. And if you let comfort lead your decisions, your progress will plateau and eventually collapse under its own weight. And yes, adaptation is painful. It requires letting go of old identities, dismantling structures that once felt like safety, making decisions without guarantees. But that pain is not punishment, it's pruning. It's refinement. It's the shedding of what no longer fits. You cannot evolve into your next level while clinging to the patterns that built your current one. The future will not negotiate with your nostalgia. If you want to keep growing, keep impacting, keep creating results that matter, then you must be willing to look at your life with ruthless honesty and say, this part of me needs to go, even when that part once served you well. And perhaps most importantly, adaptability means divorcing your ego from your plan. You must be more committed to the outcome than to your original blueprint. Too many people quit not because the dream is wrong, but because the first method failed. But the method was never the dream. It was just a vehicle. And vehicles can change. If the road collapses, you find another path. You don't abandon the destination. You adjust. You improvise. You adapt. And in doing so, you prove that you are not here to mimic the world. You are here to respond to it with creativity and courage. Adaptability is not reactive. It is proactive. It is staying curious when others become rigid. It is asking better questions when others keep repeating old answers. It is learning new skills, challenging old beliefs, updating your operating system not once, but constantly. It is choosing to be a student forever, not just of knowledge, but of life itself. Because life will keep teaching you, through friction, through failure, through feedback. But only if you're listening. Only if you're willing to move. Only if you value truth more than tradition. So stop clinging to the version of yourself that was good enough for last year. Stop worshiping the methods that worked when your goals were smaller. Stop defending your patterns just because they feel safe. Ask yourself instead, what version of me must emerge for this next level to become real? What must be upgraded, updated, or released? What behaviors, beliefs, or systems am I holding on to that are no longer serving the future I've chosen to create? Because the truth is simple. You will either evolve, or you will expire. Not necessarily die, but decay. Relevance will fade. Impact will diminish. The world will move forward, and you will be left wondering why your results no longer match your effort. But it won't be because you stopped working. It'll be because you stopped adapting. And you owe more to yourself than that. You are not a static being. You are a living system. And systems must be maintained. So pivot when needed. Update constantly. And remind yourself that flexibility is not weakness. It is intelligence. It is mastery. It is what allows you to stay in the game long enough to actually win it. Chapter 11. Resilience, the art of standing up anyway. Resilience is not about never falling. It's not about avoiding pain, escaping failure, or pretending you're bulletproof. Resilience is the ability to keep rising, again and again, regardless of how many times life knocks you down, regardless of how heavy the disappointment, regardless of how long it takes to rebuild what collapsed without warning. It is the inner force that says, this will not break me, even when everything around you is screaming that you should give up. It is the quiet defiance of someone who has every reason to quit, but chooses to continue anyway. Not because they have no fear. Not because they're superhuman, but because they've made a decision that their mission, their future, their identity is worth more than the comfort of staying down. There is a lie in the culture that suggests that strength is measured by how well you avoid falling apart, how perfectly you handle pressure, how gracefully you navigate chaos. But that's not real strength. That's performance. True strength, the kind that leads to transformation, to creation, to impact, is forged in the fire of failure and refined in the days when nothing makes sense, when your progress disappears, when the results stall and the world stops believing in you. It's in those moments where your resilience is revealed, not when everything is working, but when nothing is, and you still decide to show up. If you are serious about creating something that lasts, you must make peace with setbacks. Not tolerate them. Expect them. And learn how to respond to them without making them mean something about your worth. Because most people don't quit because the goal was too far. They quit because they got knocked down and interpreted the fall as a sign that they didn't belong. But the fall is not the problem. It's what you tell yourself in the fall. That voice, that narrative, that internal story, it's either your recovery or your ruin. Resilience begins the moment you stop tying your identity to your performance. You can fail and still be a builder. You can lose and still be worthy. You can fall and still be the one who rises to change the world. Look at Thomas Edison. 1,000 failed experiments. 10,000, depending on the source. Thousands of reasons to walk away. Thousands of voices telling him it wasn't worth it. But what made him a legend wasn't the light bulb, it was the refusal to stop until the light came. His resilience wasn't theoretical. It was embodied. It was tested every single day he went back into that lab and failed again. He didn't frame it as failure. He framed it as feedback, as refinement. And that framing is everything. Because when you believe that setbacks are part of the process, you stop seeing them as enemies and start using them as tools. You start building through them, not around them. Resilience also requires emotional maturity. You have to learn how to feel without being ruled by your feelings. You have to train your nervous system to hold disappointment, to sit with rejection, to endure the silence when the results don't match your effort, without collapsing, without blaming, without running. Because the longer you create, the more you'll realize, the world doesn't reward the most inspired. It rewards the most consistent. And consistency is only possible when you're resilient enough to keep going even when the path is unclear, the pace is slow, and the progress is invisible to everyone but you. It's in the quiet seasons, the ones without applause, without momentum, without obvious progress, where most people abandon their mission. They get tired. They stop trusting themselves. They look at the calendar and start using time as an argument for failure. It's been too long. It's not happening fast enough. Maybe this just isn't for me. But those are not facts. Those are interpretations. And the danger of interpretation is that it can become prophecy. If you keep telling yourself that a delay is a death sentence, you'll begin acting like someone whose future is already buried. But if you remind yourself that delay is part of development, that detours are part of design, that pressure is part of purpose, you give yourself the permission to endure. And in endurance, you find your true power. The people who create legacies are not immune to defeat. They're just immune to being owned by it. They feel the sting. They process the pain. But then they get back to work. They rise with more focus, not less. They re-enter the fight with better questions, not smaller dreams. Because for them, the mission is not optional. The creation must happen. The work must be done. And if failure is the price, they'll pay it 1,000 times. Because they've decided that the goal is worth more than the cost. Resilience also means letting go. Letting go of the version of the story you thought would unfold. Letting go of the belief that it was supposed to be easier. Letting go of timelines, of rigid expectations, of the false comfort of predictability. Because the creative journey is not linear. It's filled with dips and spirals and seasons that make no sense until years later. And if you need certainty to stay committed, you will never last. You must trade your craving for control with an allegiance to completion. It doesn't matter how perfectly you reach the mountaintop. It only matters that you do. And the beautiful thing about resilience is that it multiplies with use. Every time you get back up, you strengthen your nervous system. You send a signal to your brain, we're not quitting. You prove to yourself, through action, that you can survive storms. And that self-trust becomes a foundation for future action. You start fearing less because you've already fallen and recovered. You start moving faster because you know that failure isn't final, it's just part of the rhythm. And slowly, without fanfare, you become something unshakable. You become the kind of person who keeps promises to themselves. The kind of person who creates results not because it's easy, but because they've decided it must happen, no matter what. So understand this, resilience is not about bouncing back. It's about moving forward anyway. It's about building while bleeding, walking while weary, acting while afraid. It's not about never feeling broken. It's about refusing to stay broken. And if you can master that mindset, if you can commit to creation even when creation hurts, there will come a day when the world will look at what you've built and call it destiny. But you'll know the truth. It wasn't destiny. It was resilience, disguised as decision, wrapped in discipline, and proven in silence. Chapter 12. Learning, becoming the person who cannot be stopped. There is no final form. There is no moment where you arrive, where you know enough, where you've mastered it all and no longer need to evolve. You are not a static object. You are not a finished product. You are not done. And if you are truly committed to building something real, something that can withstand time, failure, criticism, evolution, and disruption, then you must surrender to a life governed not by certainty, but by learning. Learning is not academic. It is not theoretical. It is not reserved for classrooms or textbooks. Learning is the art of transformation through humility. It is the skill of becoming someone new over and over again without losing the core of who you are. You must become a learner not out of obligation, but out of strategy. Because learning is not a nice-to-have in the world of creation, it is the edge. It is the difference between relevance and decline, between scaling and stalling, between vision that becomes reality and vision that dies in your head because you lacked the tools to build it. And real learning is not passive. It is not consumption. It is not information for the sake of trivia or ego. It is active, engaged, painful at times. It requires you to admit what you don't know, to challenge what you think you do know, and to become comfortable with the discomfort of not yet being who you want to be. Most people stop learning the moment they start feeling successful. They plateau. They let the applause get louder than the questions. They stop experimenting. They start defending their current knowledge rather than expanding it. And that is the beginning of irrelevance. The moment you think you've arrived, you've already begun falling behind. Because the world doesn't slow down for your comfort. It doesn't stop changing just because you built something once. And if you want to stay in the game, not just this year but for decades, then you must anchor your identity not in what you've built, but in your capacity to evolve. That means making learning a core operating system, not an occasional activity. It means surrounding yourself with people who challenge your thinking, not just echo it. It means reading not just to collect quotes, but to recalibrate how you see the world. It means seeking feedback not just when it's safe, but especially when it stings, because buried in that discomfort is the exact direction you need to grow. Learning also requires brutal self-awareness. Not the kind of awareness that becomes self-judgment, but the kind that lets you audit yourself with honesty and curiosity. You need to ask yourself constantly, what am I missing? What's holding me back that I can't see? What patterns am I repeating that no longer serve me? What truths am I avoiding because they would require me to change? If you don't learn to ask those questions, life will ask them for you, through failure, through frustration, through stagnation that feels like suffocation. But when you develop the habit of self-auditing, when you turn discomfort into data, when you become more committed to growth than to ego, you begin to unlock the kind of personal evolution that makes you unrecognizable to who you used to be. And that's the goal, not to look the same 10 years from now with a few more accomplishments on paper, but to become a fundamentally different, deeper, sharper, more courageous version of yourself who creates not because you're trying to prove anything, but because creating is who you've become. That's the kind of learner the world cannot stop. The one who isn't attached to being right, only to getting better. The one who seeks correction, not comfort. The one who doesn't hide from their ignorance, but exposes it, confronts it, turns it into fuel. Because in this new world, power doesn't belong to the ones who know the most. It belongs to those who adapt the fastest. And here's the truth few will say. If you are not learning, you are dying. Not physically, but creatively. Intellectually, spiritually, you are shrinking while pretending to grow. You are repeating what used to work, mistaking movement for momentum, staying busy while silently becoming irrelevant. But when you learn, truly learn, you grow into your future. You expand into new dimensions of skill, insight, influence, and depth that allow you to build not just with your hands, but with wisdom. That kind of creation is timeless. That kind of impact outlives trends. That kind of mastery cannot be copied because it's not surface level, it's encoded into who you are. Think of Leonardo da Vinci. He wasn't just a painter. He was a scientist, an inventor, a student of anatomy, engineering, architecture, astronomy. He was obsessed with how the world worked. He lived in constant inquiry. And that obsession with learning didn't dilute his art, it enhanced it. Because all creativity is cross-disciplinary. All mastery is layered. If you want to build something truly great, you must become deep. And depth requires that you never stop learning. Ever. And so the question is not, what do I know? The real question is, what am I willing to unlearn? What truths am I willing to question? What assumptions am I ready to challenge? What identities am I willing to shed so I can grow beyond them? That's what learning demands, not just curiosity, but courage. The courage to be wrong. The courage to ask stupid questions. The courage to be the least informed person in the room and stay long enough to become one of the wisest. Because learning isn't about collecting answers. It's about learning how to keep asking better questions. And when you commit to that level of learning, not as a tactic, but as a way of life, you become someone who cannot be stopped. Because no matter what happens, no matter what breaks, what shifts, what changes, what collapses, you will rebuild. You will evolve. You will outlearn the obstacle, outgrow the limitation, outlast the moment. That is real power. That is sustainable momentum. That is the kind of intelligence that turns raw potential into results that matter. And when you look back years from now, when the work is done and the legacy has been written, you won't remember every win or loss, every failure or triumph. What you'll remember most clearly is who you became. Because you chose, again and again, not to stay the same. Because you chose, in a world obsessed with appearing smart, to keep learning. And that is the final law of creation. Become the kind of person who is never finished, and the world will never stop giving you the tools to build something greater.